I'm here with Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura, number 3 in the world in Classical at 2,789, number 2 in the world in Rapid at a rating I should have memorized before we started filming, number 9 in the world in... Did I say number 2 in Rapid?
I said the wrong order.
Yep, yeah, damn it. All right. I'm here with Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura, rated number 3 in the world in Classical Chess at 2,789, number 2 in the world in Blitz, and number 9 in the world in Rapid, and he is playing in his third Candidates here in Toronto. Hikaru,
It's good to see you.
Yes, good to see you too. Wow, I don't even know where to begin. Let's start with the third Candidates. We're here in Toronto. What are the emotions? We're 48 hours away from the start.
I think I'll be pretty succinct about it. It'll either be a very good event or probably a very bad event. One way or the other, I feel like in this Candidates, unlike the other ones, not really feeling much of anything emotions-wise, which is kind of weird to say, but I would say in 2016, it was definitely at one end of the spectrum. I was way too serious, did everything wrong. There definitely be players, I think, who have done that exact approach for this candidate. I'm not going to say names, but probably have done the same thing, or like probably one player who did it in the last candidates who's playing here. So 2016, I just spent every waking hour studying chess, thinking about the tournament in about the month and a half leading up to the event, and I would say that was a huge mistake when you're thinking too much about the bigger picture of what can happen, and you're trying to make sure you have every line memorized to move 30. I mean, not always, but along those lines, things tend to go wrong because there's just way too much pressure you're putting on yourself. In 2022, I would say that actually my preparation, I can say this, was a bit of a joke. I don't think it was anywhere near adequate, but in spite of it, I still was in the running for the top 2 places up until the last round when I lost to Ding. So for this one, I think I'm somewhere in between not doing enough and perhaps doing too much, but we'll see how it goes.
When you say inadequate, because I was going to start there, I was going to start in the last Candidates, and as a fan and a spectator, right, like the last round was a crazy round to watch because you and Ding were half a point apart. He needed to win. I want to say he got not much out of the opening, and it sort of looked like it was that was it. Like that was sort of the game that was going to clinch the spot. But can you take me back maybe to that tournament, maybe everything from the preparation? You said kind of a joke, not inadequate, like not adequate. What does that mean? Like to
I think what that would mean is that basically you're trying to look at a handful of openings, you're expecting what your opponents are going to play, and then you're not looking at everything broadly. Now, very specifically, I would say for that event, I was very well prepared in E4 and not very well prepared in D4, and yet most of the games I faced, people were playing E4 on move number 1. So kind of that masked, I guess, the lack of preparation, some of the stuff, I would say. Towards the end, players did play D4 at this game against Duda, where I drew the game, but there were a couple of moments where it could have been pretty bad. So it just wasn't good enough. But because people played certain opening choices, I was able to get away with it. Now, in terms of the last round game, the opening I played against Ding, the semi-terrace, is one thing that I actually looked at a bit, but I was never really very comfortable with it, either in the run-up to the event or the actual event itself, but luckily it only happened in the last round, and I think because of the situation with Ding needing to win the game, he played a line that wasn't great, and there was a critical moment, I don't exactly remember where, but I could have basically forced a draw. I don't know if it was like a 95 move or a 94. There was somewhere in the middle where I basically could have drawn the game without him getting any play. And I would say that when I missed that, and then I realized about 2 moves later that I had missed the opportunity, that was sort of the start of in my mind going wrong and doubting myself. And there was one moment later as well where I think it was close to a draw, and I spent a lot of time thinking about a very long variation, somewhere around, like, I want to say move 20, move 21, and when I also rejected that after about a 20-minute think, it all went downhill. And I think, for me, there was also the other big problem that, and this has happened in other events, even if people aren't aware of it, but towards the end of the event, it's sort of like I feel like I've done everything I had to do. I survived the opening, I felt like I was going to draw the game, and it feels like the event is kind of over. Now, obviously, you have to play a complete game, but I just started falling apart mentally. And there was actually another example of this in the American Cup as well, where I played against Wesley So, and in the finals where I was in the winner's bracket, loser's bracket, there was this Nimzo Indian game where he played this Queen C2 line, and I was a little bit worse. I played a slightly dubious line, and he could have put real pressure on me. Now, he didn't do that. He played a couple of inaccurate moves, game ended in a draw, and then it looks like, nothing happened at all, and everything's fine. But that was also a situation where sort of I felt like I'd done everything. The tournament was over, and it's all good. So I would say that was sort of the emotion that was going through my mind a little bit in the middle part of the game, along with self-doubt against Ding. And then after I missed the opportunities, he just played a masterful game. I would say once I missed those two windows to make a draw, I don't know if he played perfect chess, but he played very, very well for the rest of the game, and he was a very deserved victory for him.
Is it safe to say, going into the 2022 candidates, I don't want to say you didn't expect to be playing for first place in the final game, or you just kind of didn't have any expectations, period?
Well, I think in that candidates, my only goal was to not make a fool out of myself. Okay. I think if I go back to sort of the start of the whole process, playing the Grand Prix, the FIDE Grand Prix events in Berlin, it was mostly the same thing. I just wanted to be competitive, and that was all I was hoping for, and I did extremely well. Mind you, I got a little bit lucky in the candidates because I drew this game against Esipenko, which if I don't draw that game, probably I never qualify for the candidates in the first place. But the approach in that was just like be competitive, and then the candidates I really didn't know what to expect. I again was hoping that I would be competitive, but that was about it. And the other thing that I think a lot of people miss, since they talk about how I could have qualified for the match, is that at the time nobody, and I mean nobody who was playing in the candidates, actually believed that Magnus was not going to defend his title. So when people talk about it and think like, oh, I felt like a lot of nerves, like yes, there was some of that stuff going on, but it was not because of the World Championship. It's just because I wanted to finish in second place. And obviously, I've said this before, actually I said this in the FIDE interview too, if we had known that Magnus was not going to play, I can say in my heart of hearts, Fabiano would have shut it down. He would have gotten second place. No ifs, ands, or buts. I just want to play decent chess in that one. But towards the end, certainly finishing in second place would have been really, really nice. And I think that probably affected me as well, as I just thought, like, I'm going to finish second place. It's going to be a great result. And wasn't meant to be, but that's life.
Is it nice to be playing in a candidates where there is no question mark about the World Championship? Maybe there's a tiny one, but at least it's not, will the champ defend? Does second place matter? Is it kind of nice to at least sort of be back to a place of stability?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are people who said that they wonder if Ding's going to defend his title. I cannot think of any good reason why Ding won't. Even if he loses every game, gets embarrassed, he's still going to get a nice payday, and he's going to play the match. I just don't see any world where he doesn't. So the stability certainly is good, knowing that everybody is only playing for first place. Because I think last time around with Fabiano specifically, he wasn't sure, and that's why he tried very hard to force some wins. And he lost some games that he normally would never lose, like the Dudok game is a good example amongst others. So yeah, having the stability is nice, and I think everybody knows what's at stake, and you just play, and it's a winner-take-all, effectively.
I'm going to give the viewers at home a very small history lesson, because I feel like something like 90% of chess fans might be from the last 4 years, right? But when we look back at the rating charts, your peak was 2815, and that was October of 2015. Right,
2016, but who's counting?
Yeah, well, 2015, and then I know you played in the candidates the following year.
Yes.
And what I found fascinating about your career was that you played in the candidates in 2016, but like there was a kind of like a downswing, a small period there, and then you actually, what I didn't know is right before the pandemic, like last rating period of 2019, you were something like 2736, which is a wild rating for you just as a fan. I mean, you're used to Hikaru being 2750, 70, 80, etc. And then the pandemic happens, COVID happens, we all become influencers and online personalities, and now you're back to world top 3, 2790. So that period of time, 2020, 2021, how has it changed your life? Obviously as a creator now, but also just for chess, the love for the game.
Well, I think the main thing is the biggest issue with chess, and this I think also plays into why people play so badly in the cancer. There's so many mistakes versus, say, a normal top-level event, is that you're going from tournament to tournament playing. And when you have one player who's so dominant the way that Magnus Carlsen has been, like I'll use myself. When I was coming up and becoming very good, like I thought I had a chance of being world champion. You're playing to gain ranking spots. You think you have a shot at that. And at some point, like for me, I would say around like 2011, 2012, Magnus just completely started dominating. I mean, even before that, he was already well on his way to that. But, around the time that he beat Anon, which I think was 2013-ish, it was very clear that that was not a goal that anybody realistically, like if you're being honest with yourself, it was not possible to become world champion. I think that when you have that in your mind, it's then you're trying to gain ranking spots. Maybe you can get to number 2, but there's really no ultimate goal. And I think when you don't have that ultimate goal, the motivation is very hard to find that. And I think for myself, because of my talent and my ability, for a long time I was able to keep my rating around 2670, 2770, 2780-ish. But then in 2019, it all kind of went downhill. And I think that hinged on a handful of results. But I would also say that around that time, I started streaming a lot more. I think when people look at this event where I lost most of my points in Croatia, this Grand Chess Tour in Zagreb, I think I lost 4 games and drew 5 games, if I remember correctly, finished dead last. But I was already starting to stream. I think I streamed at least probably 4 or 5 of those days during the event. And so it wasn't a good time. I was kind of, I think, of two minds. But then when 2020 and 2021 happened, I felt very freed. I obviously had not played over the board chess in a long time. I'd only played online, and I felt very little pressure. Whereas before, that was all that I had. Playing over the board, trying to earn money, earn a living, these things were very critical. And I think, when something becomes a job, a complete job, where you're just traveling, like I go to a tournament, play the tournament, leave day after, and then you do it again over and over and over again, you repeat the cycle, you lose the joy, you lose the passion for it. And I think probably a lot of the top players, I would say that's very true for, where I feel like that period, like 2016 to 2019, they played all these Grand Chess Tour events, all these FIDE Grand Prix. And I mean, obviously some people are still very good, they're still going to do well, but I felt overall that the passion for most players was not there. You're just playing, and it's just like you take it one game at a time, but you're just going tournament to tournament. So after the pandemic, when I came back to it, I think there were a couple things. First of all these people during the pandemic had been watching my stream, these top players. I'm not saying they're watching every day, but they had at least seen it. And I know some people, like Wesley, hey Wesley, I think watch it very frequently. And I think there is something to be said, and this I think doesn't only apply to me. I think it applies to other streamers as well. I mean, hopefully it'll apply for you too. But that I think when people watch, when they watch streamers, or you watch people streaming chess, your view of the person becomes very different when you actually have to compete against them than it is before, because you sort of, like I would say with Magnus, for example, when he watched my stream, I'm explaining a lot of these things, and sure, most people, I would say 95% won't pick up a lot of things from the stream, but those GMs are like 2,700 plus, so they watch very close. There are a lot of little things that they will see, and so I think the perception becomes very different of who you are as a player and what you're doing, and then you're also a personality as well. So it's like I think they're not able to like fit you in that box or like view the way they were before, and I think that helped me a lot in my comeback in Berlin. And also there's the fact that when you're spending all these hours streaming, a lot of people don't really know, are you studying chess, are you not studying chess, these sorts of things. And I think all these doubts and all these things they've seen, like the image just isn't clear anymore of what the player is. So I think it's all those things have benefited me greatly.
Well, if I was going to ask you, you think it's a plus or a minus, but you tend to lean more of a plus.
And what?
Like just people watching.
Yeah, I think it's a huge plus. As long as you can do what I do, where I'm not playing my main openings. I think that's probably the biggest issue. Now the top players, people like Nepo or Fabiano, could do the same thing. They're extremely good, and they could just play random openings. But I would say if you're below a certain level, you can't do that. Like you don't have a second repertoire of openings. You don't have that grasp of the game to do it in that kind of way. And from that standpoint, if you're playing your main openings, it's a huge negative, because then people will see your games online. They'll see how what you think of pawn structures, how good your opening knowledge is. Like for example, if I go back to when I played Magnus in this famous match, I think it was 2009 or 2010, I forget when it was, in Moscow, the famous Blitz match, Magnus was able to see that my opening theory was not great. We played a bunch of games, played a bunch of different openings, and I think one of the biggest things that he realized is that my opening theory, my general knowledge was not great at that time, and he was able to use that against me a lot in some future games over the following years, and I lost a lot to him.
Because of that Blitz match, I know you talked about it. That really is fascinating. That type of stuff doesn't generally happen in the chess world, right? Like a 3 a.m. 100-game match or something.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't happen mainly because there's just like, what's the point? Right. You're just playing over and over again. What's the point? I mean, what is someone going to gain? Like, for example, if I go play Nepo 100 games, or say I play Kramnik 100 games, there's not a lot that's going to be learned because of the ages that we're at and the amount of times we face each other. But at that time, Magnus and I had only played a handful of times over the board. I don't think we really played, Rapid wasn't really a thing back then, but we hadn't played much Blitz. So neither of us really knew each other, and so it sort of made sense to play. Now, obviously, I've said this too, I would never do that. If I were given the choice, I never would have done that, looking back, but it is what it is.
Has the online chess boom of, let's say, the Title Tuesdays and the Speed Chess Championships, has it made classical chess better or worse? And I'm speaking strictly from the standpoint of openings, because I feel like the last 3 years have improved opening theory 15 years. Like, it's unbelievable the amount of things that have been analyzed, the Italians, the Spanishes, like all these different lines, the Berlin of D4, the semi-Tarish that you played. Like, is it good or bad?
Oh, I mean, it's great for me since I don't have the amount of hours in the day to study the way other top players do. I think if I were to pinpoint it, I think the biggest difference is Chessable. I think Chessable has really changed the game a lot. It's very easy to be lazy and not study and just go buy a course because
Right.
so many strong players have made courses, and there are certain things that they can try and hide, perhaps like one or two lines, but pretty much 95% of what are in their courses are very, very good. And so that's essentially like, I mean, I don't want to use the word cheat because obviously a lot of people take that in a different way, but it's a way of sort of like not having to put in the same amount of work or effort that like I had to if you go back like 6-7 years. And so and of course that also makes it a lot harder for the top players too, because now the players they play against for 2600, they're using these same resources, and the natural ability, the natural intuition, the advantage that we have is pretty much gone. Like if I play against a 2600 over the board, if they know they're opening, even if I'm white, I'm not going to get much of an advantage. And I think that makes it very, very hard. I think that's also a reason that you see people like Levon Aronin, for example, talking about how much they love Fischer random chess, because when it feels like the game is so well mapped out and lower players specifically are able to get out of the opening with no problems, you feel like, what's your advantage? Why are you playing this game anymore? I think on some level.
What is the future of chess in your opinion? Is it Fischer random? Is it rapid? Is it blitz? Is it classical? What's the mix that we're going to see in maybe 5 years?
Well, nobody's going to like my answer on this, but I think nothing's going to change. I think, truth be told, I think FIDE is very, very resistant to change. I don't think they want to get away from the long history they have with classical chess and the classical world champions and the whole format. And so I really don't think a whole lot is going to change. I think there are probably going to be more rapid and blitz events for sure, but I think FIDE is going to be happy with whoever wins the classical world championship. And I know that's not the answer a lot of people want to hear, but I just don't see it changing within FIDE. If they were unable to convince Magnus, or they were unwilling to do what he wanted in order for changes, I mean, while Prague might be good, Noterbeck might be good, many of these players I think are going to contend in 10 years for the World Championship. I don't think anyone's going to be as dominant as Magnus has been, or perhaps will be. And if they're not changing it for him, I don't think they're changing it for anybody.
You think it's better for chess to have a dominant champion or a big three like a tennis?
I think there's some advantage to having a big three. That definitely, I would say, is one of the big issues for trying to make chess bigger, is that if you watch the tournaments and Magnus is always winning, at some point it becomes very boring for a fan when the same person's winning over and over again. So I think having a big three, or like say anyone in the top 10 even for that matter, because frankly I feel like if you were to remove Magnus from the equation and I look at the top 10, I think anybody in the top 10 could win a tournament in a given week. So that perhaps would be better, and I think eventually we're headed that route. I also would say I don't think we're going to have a world champion who's anywhere near as dominant as Magnus as we go forward. I think most players are going to be around the same level. So we could have a different world in the future where we see whether it's better or whether it's worse.
A fun question for you. Obviously, you love chess, and you're... I mean, I hope, right? Like, you love chess. We can start there. Do you love chess?
So it's funny. I was reading a book recently on Andre Agassi, this autobiography, and there are many spots in the book where it says, he's forced to play tennis. I hate tennis. Yeah. You see this "I hate tennis" phrase many, many times, and I would say that I think most top chess players definitely are not huge fans of chess. They'll say, "Yeah, I do it because it's what I spent my life on. I play it," but they don't really like it that much. And I would say I was very much in that camp probably until the pandemic. Where it's something to do, but I feel like it's not very fulfilling. Generally speaking, I mean, you go play chess tournaments, make a living, but it doesn't necessarily feel like you're doing anything super exciting. Now, obviously for me now, I love chess. I think the fact that I'm able to actually inspire people through the competitions, through the content, all these different things, definitely it makes it feel like I'm doing something worthwhile. So I definitely do love chess at this point. But that was probably not true from about 2015 to 2019, I would say. So it's changed.
It's changed. Well, I guess we can pause the question there and sort of say you love chess. Let's just say it's good that we're having the interview now. You love chess, and you're obviously...
Well, I mean, I guess what I would say is, I mean, I love the game itself.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the game itself, but like the structure of the tournaments, the having to travel over and over again, these sorts of all these things, politics, I never really liked them. I still don't like them, but. All this stuff is much more moderate. My views of all this stuff it's much more tempered than it was like in 2019.
But I mean, like, let's say just the activity. You love the game, and obviously you're very, very good. What do you love in life, but you're not very good at?